Hello and welcome to this videocast on leading dispersed organizations and remote leadership. My name is Bernard Zimmermann. I'm the managing partner of Con-TACT, consultants in technically advanced coaching and training. So why have we created this videocast? Considering the spread of the coronavirus across all countries around the world, and the implication it has on the operations in organizations, we thought it would be good to share our experience on remote leadership to help organizations who all of a sudden have to create a dispersed organization, as they have to force their employees to work in their home office, or other organizations who had already a globally spread organization, but through the restriction of travel, they have to go in a different operational mode in how to lead the different parts of the organization spread around the world. In this videocast, I will first give you a definition of a dispersed organization. Then I will talk about the underlying attitude to leadership using one specific model and its impact in a remote context. I will talk about the risks associated with remote leadership or dispersed organizations, and I will talk about the challenges and the requirement profiles for employees and leaders in a remote organization. The fundamental definition of a dispersed organization is very simple. It's an organization form where the members of the organization are geographically separated. Whether they are only a few kilometers or a few hundred kilometers apart or 1,000 kilometers doesn't really matter. Other elements of remote organizations are cultural divides. You spread in a global organization across many cultural boundaries. You're spread across many time zones, and most of the time you have members in the organization who are not native speakers of the common language, English. So, diving into the underlying attitude for leadership, I want to share with you one model that has actually been developed in the 1960s, but still highly relevant, and that's the theory X and theory Y. That's how people in a role of responsibility, and in this case, meaning a leadership role, think about the employee. And theory X is that the thought process is our employees are lazy, they're not motivated, they need to be pushed, they need to be forced to work, otherwise they wouldn't do any work. When you think about how that works out in leadership, obviously one element could be micromanagement. It could be a coercive or directive leadership style. And with obviously then micromanagement means a lot of supervision, checking on and on and on whether or not they're doing the job. When you apply this to a dispersed organization in a leadership role, automatically one of the key questions comes up when you have this mindset is, what are my people doing all the day? What are they busy with? I don't see them, so what's going on? And the assumption that they're lazy creates the next question is, how can I push? How can I push them to do the work? What do I need to do that they feel the pressure? And in extreme cases, I've actually heard that in coaching conversation, that people said, I need to use fear. I need to pressurize them to be busy. Now, I hope you all know that fear is not a good driver for motivation, and you may not be in this camp. Maybe you're in the other camp. So let's talk about theory Y. Theory Y is actually just opposite the theory X. There, the assumption is that the employee or the employees are motivated. They're driven to do the work. They're happy to do the work, to engage in the work. What they need is direction and know what they need to do. And of course, they still need motivation. Now, when you consider this in the leadership context, obviously something else emerges because they're self-driven, they're motivated. You may find different leadership styles very effective. Participatory, visionary, or a servant leadership style to really help them to do their work rather than force them to do the work, give them inspiration and motivation through the leadership and not kind of pressure of generating fear. So, and based on this, it's obvious that as a leader, you would have different questions in mind than when you're on the other side of the spectrum in Theory X. So in Theory Y, with that underlying attitude, the questions would be, how do I keep motivation and loyalty of people in my dispersed organization high? How do I stay in contact for support when they need me, when they have questions? How can I give them quick answers or some guidance if they need it? And looking at the whole organization or the whole team, how can I ensure that the whole team functions? What do I need to do that the team stays together and the team really works well and performs at the level we'd like to see? So let's talk about the risks in the organization, in a dispersed organization. I don't think it's a surprise that when you see my number one risk I listed, that's communication. Why do I put communication at the top? Very simple reason. When you look at the research that's been done comparing local and dispersed organizations, people found that the frequency of communication between a local leader and a dispersed leader can be up to 100 to 1,000 times. That means in a dispersed organization, a remote member of the organization could get 1,000 times less information points or snippets than a local person. So that's a big risk because communication is the key element in leadership. So you need to think, how do you actually bridge this gap? How do you minimize this gap? Maybe you're not at 1,000, but even at 100 times less is very significant. So what do you need to do to stay more in touch, to mitigate this risk? Second one is effectiveness. In the same pieces of research, people also looked into performance of organizations. And what they found is that there is a significant risk for dispersed organizations. They lose up to 30% of performance, that meaning effectiveness. And that's a big number, I think. So the effectiveness means, how is work being organized? How is it distributed? How is it being brought together? How is it being made visible? And how is delivering happening in the organization so things are running smoothly? Think about that. And then conflicts. Now, when you think on conflicts in a local situation and in a dispersed situation, in a local situation, you probably hear members of your team that they make funny comments or kind of not so funny comments anymore, or they avoid each other, or they I don't know, maybe even shout at each other, depending what's socially acceptable in your culture. You see that. That's in your field of perception. In remote places, you don't see it. You may not even hear anything. You can notice it, can look into. So what's happening when we're actually speaking? Are they speaking with each other? Are they exchanging while we're together online? Are they actually communicate with each other on emails? All of a sudden somebody dropping off. Think about it. The earlier you catch a conflict, the easier it is to manage. We all know when a conflict blows up in your face, that's very hard to actually restore a good relationship. So the last point I want to make from the risks, that's called amplification. That's related to really the effects, what happens in a dispersed organization. The negative aspects, which may have some impact on a local situation, they massively amplified in a remote situation. So let's, for example, conflict. Recognizing conflict is already an element. Communication I meant before, but also social cohesion. If you're not that close together in a local situation, that could still work okay, But if it's in a dispersed situation, then no social cohesion, no good relationship, that's a disaster. Okay, so that's just one element what amplification means. All the small pieces which you can still keep under control in the um, local situation, it requires much more attention in the dispersed or remote situation. Okay, to the challenges. I said I'll talk about the challenge for direct reports and leaders. Let's first look in the challenges for direct reports for employees when they're either in home office or in a remote location. So they have very little social contact. It doesn't happen that they meet at the coffee machine or bump into each other in a corridor or pass by the desks. They may experience loneliness at work because nobody's around, especially in the home office, or they have local distractions, either in the home office with spouse and kids or in a different locations where other members of other parts of the organization, the local organization, do something that's very different from them, and they've been asked whatever and distracted. It may be misunderstandings, like the language, the cultural aspects of communication, or just kind of the incomplete communication that can lead to misunderstandings. And then the other challenge is then the loyalty, between the local boss and you as their virtual boss. Who I'm going to be loyal to more, who is actually in charge of my career, of what's happening with me, my pay rise, etc., etc. So that's a thing to consider. And then let's look into the requirement profiles for such employees. Now, what is needed for them to be at their best and not creating the loss of 30% in performance when you actually have people dispersed around the globe or in different locations. So the first element is the ability to do collaborative work. Be very collaborative in the thinking, and now when they do their job, their task, their package, that they need to have the ability to constantly say, so how does that link into the other pieces, the other packages? What do the others need? How can I contribute to the team in order to deliver the final result? And at the same time, they need to have the ability of working autonomously, because it's their leader, you're not always there. The team is not always there. There's only maybe a few members of the team and their site, but they need to be able to do their work without supervision, and have their own ideas, have their own. You can't always be in touch with them. They also have to have a good ability to planning and controlling their work. Get it really organized and ready to be structured so it actually runs smoothly without supervision, without direct interference from you as their boss. And obviously, they also have to have a high level of technology affinity. If they hate video conferencing, how do you actually make them to stay more often in touch with you, with the other team members? When you think about all these requirements, obviously, you may have members in your team who are not at the best, but then it's a question of a development plan. What you need to do, what you need to help them with, how do you need to coach them, support them in your conversation, that they develop these skills and competencies. Now let's look into your challenges as a leader. What's happening there? And what are the key challenges? And I first look into the organization, look into the team before a more introspective aspect of that. So as a leader, you need to take care of the relationship, the cohesion in the team. So how do you actually get that if people are not meeting regularly? How do you keep them together, the cohesion, the social cohesion, the quality of relationship? How do you maintain trust or even build trust? We all know trust can be destroyed in a very short period of time. It takes a long time to grow, and even longer to grow back when it's been destroyed once. So what's there? What you do to actually keep a high level of trust? Remember when I talked about the risk in communication? How do you actually exchange information? How do you communicate that everybody is at the same page? They have all the same information. They know what to do. They know when goals are shifting, objectives are changing, etc. But they know why and how. So that's a challenge. And then I said before, conflicts. How do you manage conflicts? How do you the sensitivity, what's needed for the sensitivity to identify conflicts when they're at the low level and not kind of in a very aggressive stage. And the other challenge is, how do you control the tasks of the team, of the organization? What you need to put in place that it doesn't need your presence because you can't. Yeah? And last challenge I want to list here is employee development. You need skilled employees. You need them to develop their skills further. Now, they may actually report to a local boss as well. And I've worked with some leaders that, developing them is not my task when they remote because they have the local boss. But is that the right approach? Because it's the challenge for you if you haven't got the skill profile you need for your part of the organization. So based on the challenges I presented before, what is the requirement profile for leaders to be effective in a remote context? I'd like to share with you the top 4 core competencies I consider necessary to be an effective leader in a dispersed organization. Number 1 is shaping effective relations. So being able to create relationships of high quality. That requires empathy, that requires deep listening, that requires attention to the members of the organization, and be active in the way you increase the quality of the relationships. Number 2 is effective communication. With the risks are presented and the challenges on effective communication, it's clear that you have to be very effective in how you communicate. You have to be very succinct in your communication. I've experienced people who rambled in online meetings and they lost their participants in no time. So being succinct in the discussion, but also being clear in what needs to be done, keeping people at the same page that they know when things are shifting, it's all fine because they can rely on you being a highly effective communicator. Number 3 is a strong presence online and offline. When you're in meetings, what do you do to be present really there, that they feel, yes, we have our leader in the virtual room? And offline, to give them the signal of presence, whether you use a social platform like Yammer or whether you have just chat functions or TeamSpace, whatever. What are you doing to give your people in remote locations the feeling that you're actually present, you are available for them? Number 4, that's more the introspective part of the competencies, is self-management. Talked about the 24/7 challenge before. So what are you doing to actually keep your energy high? You can't be available 24/7 all the time. So how do you manage the boundaries between highly effective work and leadership and recovery phases, that you actually stay on top of your performance curve and are seen as a highly effective and available leader? And then another aspect, no surprise there, it's the affinity to technology. Whatever you use for online communication, for offline communication, you need to be savvy. Whether you like it or not, technology must work. The worst thing that can happen is technology gets in a way if you're not mastering technology. So make sure you know how things work and you can recover from situation when things go wrong. That's just important for you to really be effective as a leader in a remote situation. So let me just summarize. So I've given you a definition of a dispersed organization. Key element is geographical separation. I talked about the attitudes underlying to leadership, the theory X and theory Y, and how it impacts on a remote leadership role. And as when you remember, for me, the clear thing is I'm going first into the arena of the theory Y, that I consider employees being motivated and self-driven. Then I covered the risk of communication, of conflicts, of effectiveness, and the amplification effect. I talked about the challenges and the requirements for employees and for leaders in a dispersed organization. So what do you do now? How do you actually use the information I've presented to maybe change something in the way you lead your remote organization, your virtual team? Maybe you have a reflective moment with your colleagues, a discussion, what you can do, what you all can do. Maybe you just have a pair to sit together and think about what does that mean for us, for me, in the way I lead my team, my organization, to be effective and really have an impact in a positive way, that performance stays high no matter what. Over the years, more than 10 years, I've been working with leaders in remote organizations. Done a lot of coaching conversations. I gained a lot of insights also on my own practice of leading virtual teams, but heard it also from leaders when they developed their strategies, how to be much more effective in a dispersed organization. If you're interested, get in touch with me and we can talk about how to share my experience and my insights I had in dispersed organization and remote leadership. We are at the end of this videocast, and I would like to thank you for listening. I hope you find it useful and valuable and practical enough that you can think of ideas how you can work on your remote leadership. If you're interested to dive deeper, get in touch with me, and I'm happy to share my expertise and my experience on remote leadership. I wish you all the best and a successful time ahead. Again, thank you very much and goodbye.